Overall, I thought the recent Channel 4 documentary was a decent and respectable effort, although personally I had some issues with it. The major issue is that the title that accompanies the TV show, Murder or Mistake, ignores the idea that Lucy Letby was a scapegoat, which is now supported by evidence and allegations from experts. In fact, crime reports concerning 4 individuals involved in the trial are known to have been sent to Cheshire Police. In some ways, Mark MacDonald played a hand in attempting to shift the case to what could be described as a diplomatic resolution. For instance, after meeting with doctors Dimitrova and Eitan, he said 2 experts had looked at the Baby O case and concluded there were no crimes. In fact, it's actually been reported in Private Eye that Dr. Dimitrova has reported Dr. Stephen Perjury to Cheshire Police for gross negligence manslaughter and perverting the course of justice based off the Baby O case alone. That said, I think it was a reasonably intellectually honest and diplomatic effort for the point in time at which it was made. I think the documentary makers themselves might not be certain as to innocence or guilt, and from that perspective, whilst the documentary will probably not damage their career, it is likely to be forgotten about at some point as the case develops. In terms of the evidence that Lucy Letby was used as a scapegoat, there are 3 big items of evidence, in my opinion, which are all currently in the public domain. Firstly, and most recently surfaced, evidence that details relating to a botched needle procedure by Dr. Stephen Perjury were kept back from the coroner and pathologist and then further distorted by fictitious notes written by Dr. Perjury. Secondly, there are multiple grounds for a perjury investigation into Dr. Ravi Jayaram. Thirdly, an early iteration of the famous shift chart suggests it was heavily manipulated by the time of the trial. The issue of the needle insertion by Dr. Perjury was addressed in the documentary. However, they did not address any of the reasons that suggest justice may have been obstructed, nor did they bring up the fact that Dr. Dimitrova has reported Dr. Stephen Perjury to Cheshire Police for gross negligence manslaughter and perverting the course of justice. One of the biggest developments relating to the case quietly surfaced in the Lucy Letby case, part 28, in Private Eye. Reading through the Private Eye article, 2 new experts argue that page 97 of the evidence, I think that's another way of saying Baby O's medical records, is a resuscitation sheet that clearly shows a large drop in hemoglobin after Dr. Perjury inserted a needle in the region of the liver. However, Perjury documented it in the notes as if the fall in hemoglobin had happened before the needle insertion. Hall, as in the uncalled medical expert not used at the trial but assigned to Lucy Letby's defence, told MD he never saw page 97 of the medical records. The question that is then raised is, was page 97 of the medical records missed or omitted? So I can't say that I've read this page 97 of the medical records, nor have I seen the notes written by Dr. Perjury which allegedly try to distort the timeline. It was also reported in Private Eye that Cheshire Police are refusing to investigate this and have been told they will be reported to the Independent Office of Police Conduct if they don't. So this is a very contentious aspect of the case, and some might find it reasonable to think that Cheshire Police are justified in choosing not to investigate considering the jury verdict. It is worth bearing in mind that experts have been critical of the handling of the earliest days of the investigation by Cheshire Police. So the jury verdicts could be seen as a self-fulfilling prophecy considering the way Cheshire Police chose to investigate. Choosing to now follow an alternative line of inquiry would also be a concession that they spent large sums of money potentially barking up the wrong tree. So the big issues with the Baby O case are that firstly, Dr. Perjury may have written misleading notes. Secondly, when the reporting doctor reported the death to the senior coroner's officer Stephanie Davis, she did not mention that the needle insertion had taken place. This has led Stephanie Davis to publicly question if the post-mortem results were accurate, considering the information provided.
Had the paediatric pathologist been aware of this attempted needle aspiration, would he have then not given the underlying cause of death as prematurity, but this procedure?
The documentary contained some misinformation from Liz Hull with regards to the Baby O case. She said that trial pathologist Dr. Manarides ruled out a needle insertion. If you look at his testimony from 29th of March 2023, he says, quote, "Yes, this looks like it could be a perforation injury," close quote. It's just that in his opinion, the most likely explanation for the perforation injury was a procedure by the pathologist post-mortem. So the next bits of evidence, which suggests that the convictions of Lucy Letby may not have been a mistake, but rather something else, relates to the evidence given by Dr. Ravi Jayaram. It has been reported in the Sunday Times that MP Sir David Davis has sent in a letter to Cheshire Police calling for a perjury investigation into Dr. Ravi Jayaram. Some people think that the grounds for that complaint relate solely to an email which surfaced and was covered in this article, quote, "Hidden email cast doubt on Lucy Letby verdict." In reality, I think the grounds for an investigation extend beyond a single email, but I'm going to do a recap on the contradictions, as some may not have seen this and it wasn't covered in the documentary at all. Reading through the Unheard article, they report that Dr. Jayaram had said usually when a baby's oxygen level fell, a nurse would, quote word for word, "come looking for a doctor to assist," close quote. But he said Lucy Letby, quote, "had not called me in," close quote. So the implication of Dr. Jayaram's story is that Lucy Letby was intentionally watching a baby die, rather than interfering to help her. The Unheard article quotes from an email Dr. Jayaram had sent much closer to the time where he says, quote, "Staff nurse Letby was at incubator and called Dr. Jayaram to inform of low saturations," close quote. So in other words, his earlier email contradicts his under oath account by suggesting the only reason Dr. Jayaram was at the incident was because Lucy Letby called him. Further grounds for a perjury investigation into Dr. Ravi Jayaram are mentioned in this document, which was signed by very senior individuals in the British medical establishment, such as Mike Buick, the Deputy Director of NHS England. This document was sent to politicians earlier this year. I think the point is that they believe the trial of Lucy Letby has brought the criminal justice system into disrepute. Reading through a statement that relates to Dr. Jayaram, quote, "Enclosure 4 demonstrates that key evidence of incompetent ventilator setup was omitted from the evidence presented at trial. The responsibility for the setup of the ventilator is the responsibility of the consultant," close quote. The next piece of evidence which raises doubts about the integrity of the manner in which Lucy Letby was investigated is this article which appeared in Unheard. Why the Lucy Letby case isn't closed, damning new evidence has emerged. It relates to the famous shift chart which supposedly showed Lucy Letby present at every suspicious incident. Reading through this quote, "According to Evans' initial analysis, and as the below chart illustrates, Letby was not in the hospital when 10 out of the 28 incidents he described as suspicious took place. So it appears that Dr. Evans only decided an incident was suspicious if Lucy Letby was present for it. For me, this also raises red flags about Cheshire Police, who apparently did not take issue with Dr. Evans dropping supposedly suspicious incidents once he found out Lucy Letby was not present. I also take issue with the way that Dr. Evans accused Mark MacDonald as being part of the metropolitan elite and presented himself as some kind of rustic Welshman. Although Dr. Evans presents himself as a patriot, when he had a political run with Plaid Cymru, he was accused of acting in a self-interested and deceptive way. Reading through this newspaper article from 2019, which describes some of the controversy with Dr. Evans' political run, quote, "Former Plaid Cymru Minister Jocelyn Davies has apologised for referring to a candidate for her party's leading lay position as a, quote, puppet. So technically she's apologising, but you can see from the article that she'd previously said of Dr. Evans, quote, "We don't need a puppet controlled by elements outside the party as chair." Dr. Evans would respond saying, quote, "I find the use of the word puppet in Jocelyn's article contemptible. I am nobody's puppet and have held some very senior positions in my professional career. So on its own, this article wouldn't be a hugely authoritative assassination of Dr. Evans' character. However, I think it's relevant that this is a similar line of criticism to that he receives as an expert witness." Some people who have seen the documentary and have heard the account of the parents have said that it was inappropriate for Lucy Letby to bring in the memory box. If you look at this quote from nurse Melanie Taylor during the court case, she said she described an occasion where she gave the parents a memory box. "I remember that I would have updated them and given them a treasure box, hopefully a photograph, which is usually what we try to do, and for every admission." The prosecutor then says, "A treasure box, is that something that's prepared for the parents at that early stage?" Melanie Taylor then says, "Yes, they are pre-made. They're journey boxes to keep mementos in." The other factor with these parents is that their case was not brought to trial. Some people have framed the police as working hard to ensure justice for these parents. However, I think there are arguments when looking at the construction of the shift chart that anything they could have pinned on Lucy Letby, they would have brought to trial. I think there's a fair chance that the police noticed a huge flaw in the prosecution case for this potential indictment, and in that regard, I think they also could have got back to the parents to let them know what it was. So all in all, in conclusion, I thought the documentary was a fair and open-minded exploration of a case that is roughly at a half-time stage after an initially dodgy and incompetent police investigation.